Hey guys, it's Dante from Ferrigno Freedom Channel. Welcome back. I'm coming to talk to you about another video today, but I want to start off by saying to all the dads out there, Happy Father's Day. I know I'm having a great Father's Day. My kids have been having a good time. My boys got me a card for Father's Day, and that's about all you can ask for from teenage boy these days, is just that they remember who you are every once in a while. But no, they're good boys, and I'm thankful for them. But I wanted to come and spend a few minutes with you guys. This video is really long, so I don't think I'm going to be able to cover it all in one shot because I got to go to work this afternoon, for one. And two, maybe you don't have time to stick around for an hour plus long discussion. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump into this video. This was recommended to me by Herbie Lena. She said she's a new subscriber from Homestead How. Love this review of the video and to hear your ideas and input. PragerU on YouTube just uploaded a video interview from a famous LA trainer about carnivore and how he cured his leukemia. They covered a mountain range of information, which I think you'd enjoy. Then if you'd review it on your channel, we'd get to hear all 3 points of view. So that's what I'm going to do right now. All right, here we go, and let's get it started.
Vinnie, it's so great to have you here. And I would say that I have had an awakening when it comes to health, nutrition, fitness over the last few years. It started with the lockdowns and COVID. And I built a little bit of a distrust in what the experts would say because so many of the things that they said made no sense to me. And then most recently, I think what really set me off was when I heard an interview with the Director of Nutrition and Obesity Research, NORC. There was a woman by the name of Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford who has all the letters of the alphabet after her name, you know, MBA, whatever. And she was hired by the government, right? And so she's endorsed by our government. And she said that obesity is actually genetic. And so it doesn't really matter if you diet, if you exercise, if you sleep, if you try to de-stress. None of that really matters because you're likely to be obese, I guess, anyway. And so when I heard that, I just said to myself, gosh, I mean, all of these things that these experts are telling us make absolutely no sense. And so we got to dig into this a little bit. And so that has been really my journey into wanting to understand better what kind of food we're being fed, what kind of information we're being fed. And it's really why I became so fascinated with your work and your story.
2 things before he even gets started. I will say that you can be genetically predisposed to gain weight faster. There's no doubt that between me and my best friend growing up, he and I ate pretty much the same diet, and I tried to eat better food than he did. But he was always skinny as a rail, cut like he worked out every day, though he didn't. I worked out all the time, and I was always fighting the weight. So there was a genetic factor at play, but when it came right down to it, the foods were a huge factor, and eventually even genetics caught up with him. So eating this garbage is going to catch up to all of us. I have a very thirsty dog over there. If you can hear him lapping up water, sorry about that. Many people who contend to be experts on nutrition over the past 40 years absolutely have no clue about anything to do with actual nutrition. They just know a few anecdotes and they know a few things that have been repeated enough times for people to believe it.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned a book that I wrote 10, 11 years ago. Actually, it was written before that because the book started during a crisis. We had the financial breakdown back in 2008. So most of us, we were having trouble, you know, as a trainer, you know, clients went away and then clients started coming back. And then we had here in Hollywood, we had the big writer strike. And when you're a trainer that works with actors and actresses, all of a sudden your business goes away again. So I got together with one of the biggest writers in Hollywood, Dean Laurie, and we put together Fitness Confidential. And it came out of, you know, a stressful time. And here we are 10 years, 11 years later, we're back in a stressful time when we get to COVID, and the book is alive again. The book sold like hotcakes. Again, don't eat hotcakes. And then it slowed down a bit. And during the pandemic, all of a sudden, we saw an uptick on Amazon and everywhere people could buy a book. So you look at that and go, okay, people are interested in this subject. right? People want to know what the truth is. And then when you watch Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes interviewing this woman, and she's saying, hey, being fat is not your fault. I agree with a portion of that. It's not your fault because you've been sold a lie. So everyone's trying to do the right thing, but they've been sold a big lie. So what do you do with that? So at first I'm going, okay, she's right. It's not your fault. But then she starts blaming it on genetics, and it's not how much you exercise and how much you watch what you eat. None of that matters. And she's also pushing this agenda of kids, 11, 12, should be on medication to lose weight. They're actually now talking about cutting your stomach out, telling you, hey, your kid can't be trusted with a stomach. We're going to get rid of that before their 12th birthday. They don't need that. Are you kidding me? And Leslie Stahl's just sitting there going, okay. And I'm sitting there going, you're not going to ask her anything? Are you not allowed to ask this woman anything? Are we softballing it this much at this point?
Well, I think what's terrifying about what Dr. Fatima said is that you're basically signaling to the population that there's nothing you can do, and so you might as well give up. It doesn't matter. It's in your genetic. And so you might as well just take a pill to try to fix it, because there's no way to actually take any sort of action that can help you. And
one thing I can say, I was talking to somebody earlier today about, we have kind of set ourselves up to have this medical system because we somehow, as patients, we got it in our head that a pill can solve everything. And we kept looking for a pill to solve everything. And we found companies that are willing to sell us pills that don't solve everything, but claim to solve everything eventually, or if you keep taking them. And, you know, the real problem comes down to the fact that government has been leveraged by these companies. Not that the company's greed is the problem. All companies have greed. Everybody's looking to make a profit. The problem is when they try to meet the demand, but they actually use force to get their way. And it's simply through things like the Affordable Care Act and different things that we've pushed through our system that are designed to give us government subsidized health care. Because ultimately what we've gotten is more expensive health care and less actual health care ever since the government got involved in health care. I remember the arguments we used to hear back in the 80s and the 90s about the cost of healthcare, but I also don't remember the thought of having a broken arm being something that would cost me a 3 or 4 months worth of pay either. So things have changed a lot, and not for the better, since the government has gotten involved in our healthcare. And once the government started being able to dictate what can and can't happen and what insurance companies can and can't do, ultimately, the companies with all the money have simply bought more influence through those government officials and bureaucrats. And that's the big part of the problem is we asked for it. We asked for our government to do it. And now we're stuck with this big mess. If we get back to taking care of our own health and being more responsible with what we put in our bodies and what we decide we're going to allow them to put in our bodies, the more we're going to take back this healthcare situation.
You've learned from your experience, I'd love to hear your story a little bit, that there's actually a lot you can do with proper diet and nutrition and exercise, right? I mean, you were confronted with cancer, right? And you actually found a way to starve cancer out of your body by eliminating sugar. Will you just share that story with me?
Before I share that, you said something very important. She says that it's in your genetics. Okay, let's go with that for a second. If I was interviewing Fatima, my first question would be, where do these genetics come from? Were they around in 1969 during Woodstock? Because I've seen the photos. Were those people not the parents of us and now the grandparents of us, right? So when did these genetics just overwhelm this country?
So true.
Right? Special K, Kellogg's, Special K. You're too young to remember this, but I'm not. Back in the early 1980s, anyone who's watching this interview, when you're done with this, they can go click and find the Special K Pinch and Inch. The entire ad was, if you can pinch an inch,
It's on me.
you're too fat.
Can't pinch an inch. No, no, you can't pinch an inch. No way. Thanks to the cake, you can't pinch an inch. Big crispy flakes. Ooh, what a treat. High protein, low sugar. Oh, what a taste. Thanks to the cake, you can't pinch an inch.
The Kellogg's Special K Breakfast. Low fat, less than 220 calories. Try it on. You'll like what you see.
Thanks to the cake, you can't pinch an inch.
Can you imagine that? Pinch an inch. They show the ad. Oh, I'm pinching an inch. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
People can grab, we now have shows called My 1,000-Pound Life. I'm not making this up. This is a real thing,
Yeah.
right? My 1,000-Pound Life. Yet, a few short years ago, same gene pool, we haven't changed genetic. You don't have to be a scientist to understand this stuff.
Right.
Okay, I'll play along. When did those genetics come into play?
Right.
We live through the Rubenesque period in this world. Fat is beautiful. I get it, right? We're not moving in the right direction. So shaming is bad, but celebrating it, not good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think also one of the things that you said that just resonated with me is that it's not about fat shaming, because in many cases, I don't think it's the population's fault. I think we've been really manipulated to think that certain things are healthy for us while they're actually not healthy for us. I learned so much about food recently, things that I assumed is good for me and good for me to feed my children. And now I'm learning that it's actually not good for kids and not good for humans in general to consume the amount of, grains and sugar and all of these things that we don't even know how to pronounce that are in this processed food industry that we've been sold as heart-friendly type of products. And so I agree with you. We can't blame the population for being overweight or obese when we have an entire industry that is actually setting us up for failure, and people are getting sick and they're getting cancer and they're not understanding why. They're doing everything right according to what the experts are telling them to do, but they're not doing everything right because what the experts are telling them to do is actually not good for us.
It's exactly what I've been saying since the very beginning of this journey that I've been on since I started doing Lion Diet. And I know I say I'm doing a diet. It's not technically a diet. It's just changing the way I eat. It's changing my diet. And my diet is now ruminant meat, water, and salt. Occasionally I'll have some eggs or cheese or bacon or something that's outside of my normal. But every time I stick with it, I do much better. So that's my diet, not the diet that I'm on. But ever since I started this new journey, I have realized that I have just been totally sold a bill of goods since the youngest days I can remember. I mean, I can remember struggling with my weight all the way back to like 4th and 5th grade, thinking about how the fact I got to wear the husky size pants and stuff like that. And I used to have to wear a trash bag over my body when I would go running in 2nd grade football. So it's always been a struggle for me. And I tried to eat the right things. I remember being told that if you eat fat, it makes you fat. So you got to avoid all the fat. And ultimately that led to me losing my gallbladder because I wasn't using my gallbladder for any bile production to be used to process fat. So I wound up getting gallstones. And I know many people have had their gallbladder removed for that very reason. So all I can say is that we have been sold a lie for a very long time. I like to think that people weren't being nefarious in their thinking on this, that there were many people that I listened to that said these things that were well-intended but misled. And I believe there were some people who knew, especially at the highest levels, like at the levels of, I can't think of the guy's name right now, Keys. It's got a weird first name. Anyway, basically the guy who came up with the food pyramid system ever since the 1960s when he was working on our health concerns after Eisenhower's heart attack. And he's the one that kind of started pushing us in the direction of using seed oils on everything and margarine and garbage like that. It really has affected all of us in such a horrible, horrible way. And now when you look at a lot of the masters of the universe types that I see out there, like the Davos group and the WEF people, they want population reduction. They want it through healthcare and vaccinations, as Bill Gates has been quoted as saying.
First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
So when you hear people saying they want to reduce the amount of the population through healthcare and vaccinations, you can't help but wonder if they aren't behind some of this stuff with the food. And then when you look at all the money that people like Gates have invested in food production and moving us in the direction of 3D printed proteins from plants and bug proteins and things like that, it's hard not to get conspiratorial in your thinking when you start to see all this type of activity from people in high positions of power who have a goal to reduce the population.
You couldn't be more correct. People, we don't hear on commercials, we don't hear grains. We hear heart healthy grains. Oh, wait, they're heart healthy. Why? Well, because Kellogg said that they're heart healthy. Quaker Oats said they're heart healthy. And then that becomes part of the vernacular, right? We just throw that in. You have the American Heart Association, the AHA. They say heart healthy, and you go, well, wait a minute. Aren't they on our side? Well, you would think, but their money comes from Coca-Cola. It comes from Kellogg's. It comes from Unilever. It comes from all of the biggest corporations. And by the way, this is not hidden. I'm not sitting here with a tinfoil hat going, I believe that this is crazy stuff. You can go look this stuff up. And you don't have to look. You can do a simple Google search to see who's supporting the AHA and where all of their money comes from, right? I tell people, anytime you see Harvard on a study when it comes to health, turn about face and move, because it's already been tainted, because Walter Willett and company over at Harvard have been taking money from Unilever and everyone else for decades. You brought up, and I didn't talk about it yet, I thought I was the healthiest guy in the world, right? Because I was doing everything right. And of course, when you're sitting there with a six pack and you're feeling good and everything is great, you think you're going to be fine, right? Now, with my clients, I always kept them on low-carb diets. That was my secret as a trainer. But I was an endurance cyclist, so I felt, I had to have all of these grains and carbohydrates and eat these power bars and goo and all this stuff on the bike, right? I have to have this stuff because
I hear a lot of that in comments from people who are into endurance exercises and heavy training and things. I still get a lot of comments from people on that you need these things. So I'm very interested to hear the perspective of this truly expert opinion.
That's what I learned in college, right? I got that from Tulane. Why would they lie to me, right? So once I had cancer, and this was back in 2007.
Yeah, when did you get cancer? How old were you? You were already a celebrity trainer at that point, right?
Yeah. I'd been working with clients for years and years and years. I had to take a sabbatical and go deal with leukemia for a long period. And I was eating anything and everything I could during cancer because I was just wasting away. So anytime you're not puking, you're trying to eat something. So that something sometimes was ice cream because it was the only thing appealing. Because I was living in LA and it looked like I was beating cancer, all of my clients were like, you need to start juicing. You need to become a vegan. You need to. Everyone, I love in LA, everyone says you need to, as if it's a fait accompli.
So you didn't do any of that?
Well, I went into my doctor, who was this top oncologist. I know everyone says I have the best doctor. I'm not saying I had the best doctor, but my doctor didn't just work on patients. She was a research scientist, and she really didn't see patients. And the only reason I was able to get to this oncologist, this blood expert, was because one of my clients was a very wealthy, with
you had connections.
I had connections because of what I did for a living. So I got to a person that normally does not see patients. And I said to her, everyone's telling me wheatgrass, juice. I got to become a vegan. I need to get a micro, macro, medium, micro, macro. I need quinoa. I need to do all this stuff. What's the truth? And she said, no, none of that'll work. I was like, wait, what? And she goes, you're that guy in Beverly Hills that tells people not to eat sugar and grains? I said, yeah. She goes, do that. And this is in '07.
So she already knew.
Scientists knew, but the media, you see, everything that they know now, the media sometimes don't know for years. So in '07, she said to me, she goes, most cancer cells, it's a closed cell. It doesn't use oxygen to grow. They use carbohydrates to grow. And I'm sitting there going, really? She goes, yeah. So if you just starve the cancer cells of carbohydrates, they won't grow as fast. Now, when they put my cancer in remission, they told me that
Hold on. Before we go on, I'm going to back that up just a few seconds so we can make sure we don't miss any of that. I had heard people say they had been able to help their cancer situations with this, but those were in comments. This is the first time I've not only had somebody who's world-renowned come out and say that this was the recipe for his cure, but also that a research scientist who is a doctor was able to confirm that. So to me, that's very encouraging because I don't have any experience with cancer, but I know there are some of you who have contacted me through comments and through emails. I know there are some of you who have contacted me through comments and through emails who are dealing with family members or yourself that has dealing with cancer. This could be a very big piece of information for you. Let's keep going.
Use oxygen to grow. They use carbohydrates to grow. And I'm sitting there going, really? She goes, yeah. So if you just starve the cancer cells of carbohydrates, they won't grow as fast. Now, when they put my cancer in remission, they told me that you now have an amount of cancer we can deal with. Your leukemia is still in your bones. And I said, okay, how long will it be before it grows back? And they said, on the short end, 4 years. Some people go 5, but that's about it. And I said, so in 5 years, I'm going to need a little touch up on chemo? And she goes, yeah, but we'll catch it in time. It won't be as drastic. You won't be throwing up all the time. Great. In my mind, if I can go 6 years, that's great. If I can go 7, that's wonderful. I haven't had it. We're talking in 2023. I haven't had one drop of chemo since 2007. But there's no scientist studying me, right? What am I, some kind of weird enigma that it just cancer's not growing back?
So what do you think it is that you...
That is so big. My mother-in-law had a bout with cancer, and it was rough when it was colon cancer, and she had to do the whole chemo thing, and I know many of you have had experiences with this. It's awful. She got to the point where she'd almost rather say, you know what, if I got to deal with it again, I don't want to deal with the chemo. So to hear this, to hear that starving the cancer has been the miracle for him being able to get not only an extra year out of his 5-year prognosis, but also a 6th year, a 7th year, and what did he say, 2007? So what are we talking? 16 extra years that he hasn't had to go back for chemo? That's a lifetime for somebody who has suffered with cancer. That's amazing.
I stopped eating this kind of stuff. For the audience,
I'm just checking to see if you're tempted.
Yeah, there's a bowl full of chocolate something there.
You will never touch it. It's full of dust.
To me, that's a rattlesnake. That's cancer in the bowl. People
And what is it? The sugar?
The sugar. It's the sugar or any kind of carbohydrate. Because here's something people don't understand about carbohydrates. If I ate, or if you ate 10 of those, we would get what's known as a glucose spike. Now, you've seen this because you have kids, and they're under 5. You go to a birthday party with your kids, and you see your kids and all of the other kids going, wah, when you get there, right? That's the sugar high. But I want you to notice the next time you go to a party, within 45 minutes to an hour, they're cranky. They want to go home. You'll notice their face will turn red. Sometimes they'll start crying. Sugar low.
Yeah.
So when you eat a simple sugar spike, and then below where you were. So if this is the medium line, spike and then below the medium, right? That's what happens to your kids. So people.
That's what I tell people all the time. And it's not just with sugar. It's with things like caffeine, any type of stimulant. Takes you higher than normal, but then lower than normal. And if you keep doing it, you tend to need more and more, whether it's marijuana, whether it's caffeine and coffee, whether it's sugar. You just keep needing more to get that spike that you want from it. That's enough to make you feel better because you keep coming down lower. So when you get a new spike, it doesn't take you as high as you were before. So you have to have more to get back up there, but it takes you more further down. And that's, you just wind up getting stuck in a catch-22. You're putting out a fire with fire. I mean, it's an ugly cycle to get stuck in.
What about heart healthy grains like bread? That's a glycogen load, right? So if this is normal, now dietitians will tell you to have this stuff. This is the good stuff. They'll call it a complex carbohydrate, and somehow it's magically good for you. Remember, you get a spike from sugar and you go down. With this, you get a spike, but now you have it releasing onto your liver. That spike stays up for hours, not 20, 30, 40 minutes, hours. Your body has to keep releasing insulin to try to bring that spike back down.
Yeah, keep up.
Right? When that happens, you think you're doing the right thing, but you have insulin constantly. So you become resistant to insulin, number one. Number two, your body can only store so much of that sugar. So it stores what it can. The rest of it turns into a long-chain triglyceride, which is a fat. And that long-chain triglyceride goes into your fat cell and gets stored as a fat. So every time you have bread, pasta, matzo ball, anything that's a complex carb, you're causing fat to go into those fat cells. Now, here's the fun part. If that wasn't enough fun, I promise to your audience, I will stop being scientific after this. Remember I said long-chain triglyceride?
Yeah.
Big, long fat cell? We have all of the fat cells on our body after we hit puberty that we will ever have. That's it. Now all we can do is either make them bigger or smaller because fat cells are basically a bank account, right, to store energy for later. And when you put a long chain triglyceride in there, it seeps into that cell very easily. But think of it this way. If you went to IKEA and you bought a bed, you bring it home. You and your husband, you walk it into the bedroom. Why? Because you have the frame, it's taken apart. You have the mattress, you have your box spring. It's all taken apart. So you can slip it into that bedroom. But then you build the bed in the bedroom, right? Now, if you wanted to move the bed, it's hard to get out. You can't take that bed out of that bedroom unless you break it down again. Your body doesn't like to go and break down things. And it's very hard to coerce that long triglycerides from coming out of that cell.
So those formative years, especially for children, when they're...
It's very interesting. That's a good way to put it because one of the comments I often get from people is, I've been doing this for 2 weeks, I've been doing this for 3 weeks, and I haven't lost any weight. Some have even gained weight. And your body is going to resist it. You know, before I started doing lion diet, I was always trying to eat fairly well. And I think that sometimes when we send our body into shock initially doing something like that, lion diet, it might not have the same result as it had for me initially, where I got an instant energy rush and felt much better almost within the first couple of days. I mean, I don't remember it as well, but when I go back and watch those videos, it reminds me that I was feeling good from day one. And I'm noticing that not everybody has that. And I had already been cutting out sodas for a long time. I had gotten back to where I was drinking like BAI, that coconut antioxidant, whatever drink, some bull garbage about how it makes you healthy, but it ultimately was just a glass of sugar, not much better than Coca-Cola. I mean, it was sweetened with stevia, but I don't want to get into a side trail on how artificial sweeteners trick your body into doing things they're not supposed to do either. But the bottom line is we're all going to come into this at different levels, whether we're pouring down pasta and things that are just real heavy in carbohydrates, or if we're coming from a low carb background, still wondering why we're struggling. It's going that full carnivore for me, in my case, lion diet. That was just, it was like lighting a match. And then all of a sudden it just watched my body burn away. You know, it didn't happen immediately. It took several months, but it happened so fast and over such a short period of time, it felt like, here in retrospect, 2.5 years later, I'm thankful that I have my videos to review where I was, to remind myself when I'm not feeling good, or when I feel like I've put on a couple of pounds since the last time I weighed myself or something like that, that I'm not 200 plus anymore. I'm 100 and something. That's the first time I've been that since high school, and it's amazing, and I feel great all the time. But yet at the same time, life is life, and people have troubles and difficulties, and there's heartbreaks, and there's all kind of things going on in our lives that still bring us down and make us have a negative self-image. It's easy to forget where I came from. But I want to let you know that even though if it's slow to start, one thing I can suggest is don't watch the scale. If you're starting a diet like this, if you're starting carnivore or lion diet, don't even look at the scale. The first few weeks, I didn't even jump on the scale. I never weighed myself in the beginning because I wasn't doing this to lose weight. I was just doing it to save my life. But I know a lot of you are doing this because you want to lose weight, and you also realize that that may save your life. Don't worry about the amount of weight you're losing. If you want to do something that's going to really help you, take your measurements when you start and then check them once a month, because those measurements are going to tell you more than that scale is going to tell you, because sometimes you're going to put on muscle mass to replace that fat that you lose, and the muscle weighs more than fat. So those things have an effect on you mentally when you're just looking at a number on a scale. But when you're checking the size of your arm, or you're checking the size of your waist or the size of your thighs, and you're noticing the decrease in the amount of space that's there, and you start to feel your clothes feel better, that's when you'll know you're having success. So hang in there.
Out of that bedroom unless you break it down again. Mm-hmm. Your body doesn't like to go and break down things. And it's very hard to coerce that long triglycerides from coming out of that cell.
So those formative years, especially for children, when they're consuming all of the sugars and carbs, will actually have an impact on them for the rest of their lives.
And that's why we're calling it a genetic problem, when in fact, that was a long way around for me to say, sorry, Fatima, it's not genetics.
Right. It's what we're told.
This.
It's what we're told
Yes.
that is actually good for kids and okay for kids. And so do you not eat any sugars and carbs?
There are 2 times when I have, 3 times. I call it life into living. It's someone's birthday. You're at dinner with another couple and they'll say, we just got this. You got to try this baked Alaska. I'm not going to be the guy going, not me. No, not me. I'm better than you. I'll dip my spoon in there a couple of times because I already have the reputation for being that guy. Mm-hmm. So I'll dip my spoon in there, which allows everyone else.
They were afraid of your judgment?
I'll tell you what it was. It was lobster mashed potatoes before the meal came.
At Mastro's?
It was at one of, I don't know if you mentioned restaurants. We were at a steakhouse and it was lobster mashed potatoes and nobody was touching it. And this other guy says, it's because of you. So I took a spoon, I dipped it in there, put it in my mouth.
Everybody relax.
Everyone went, oh, it's okay now, right? So that's one situation where I'll put a carb in my mouth. Another is if I'm in a specialty place, I'm in Rome, right? And someone says, that's the best gelato on the planet. I'm there with my wife.
Right.
Well, what am I going to do? Not have the gelato?
Right.
Right? And I also have what I call, I'm going to name drop, but my sister-in-law is a famous actress, Kristen Scott Thomas. I have what I call the Kristen Scott Thomas rule. If I'm in front of her, I will have wine. Because I see her about once a year, and she's got really good wine.
It's so basically you're saying when it's worth it.
When it's a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Otherwise, if it's not a thing, I won't do it.
I agree with that in a lot of regards, but you do have to set ground rules for yourself, and you got to stick with them, because it becomes too easy to justify that everything is a thing, because there are so many incidences where you are with others in a social situation where that can be an issue, the things he's talking about, where you feel like, you just have to participate. But I have noticed that over time, people that really care about you are not going to mind, and they're just going to do their thing, and you can do your thing. But there are those special moments or those special times. I mean, if you're taking your significant other out for the first time and you're going to meet their parents, you don't want to make a huge deal over your food, because you don't want them to focus on you being an oddball. You want them to focus on who you are as a person. So you don't want to necessarily, like if you're eating something her mother made, you don't want to make a big thing of it. Just go along, eat it, and be done with it. But it can become a slippery slope. That's all I can say, is it can become a slippery slope, especially if you're a carb addict. So you have to make your own judgments there. Now, he said he was really healthy before. So if you came from a background where sweets were your weakness, you might have to be able to be that guy. You might have to be that guy that says, I appreciate what you're offering me, and I want to partake in what you're doing, but just understand it's not good for me. I can't do that. And if it's somebody that cares about you, then they should be okay with that. And if it's not somebody who cares about you, sometimes you just gotta say, well, sorry, suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I know that we can be realistic in this conversation because, I mean, you've raised a daughter, and
right.
It's difficult to tell a 10-year-old to not touch pasta or pizza or rice or all of these things that really fall into the bucket of, carbs and sugars. And on the one hand, we want them to live their lives. We don't want them to be afraid of food. We live in a society where it's part of our culture also to eat certain things like that. And so we don't want our kids to feel so limited in those ways. But I also know that you have developed such a deep understanding of the science behind these things and the kind of damage that sugars and carbohydrates can create on the body. And so, I mean, you even talk about how sugar and cocaine have so many similarities, right? And so how do we approach this realistically, raising kids, allowing them to have access to this stuff, but not, I guess, in an extreme situation?
That's a good question, and it's a two-part answer. First off, with my stepdaughter, we actually, and this is going above and beyond, we didn't want anybody to think that we were the weird family, because little girls already have enough pressure. We didn't want any added pressure, and I am not making this up. We had the peanut butter that we ate, right? That was only peanuts that were crushed. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we would buy it from the Hippy Dippy store. Most of the time it was almond butter or some other kind of butter. But we knew that when Tallulah's friends came over, we didn't want her to be the weird kid. We would literally go out and buy Jif and put it in the fridge. We wanted those kids to have what they would have at their home. Mm. And as a matter of fact, a lot of these kids love coming over to our house because they would wake up in the morning and say, I love that smell, because there was bacon and eggs cooking. It wasn't mommy pouring cereal out going, come and get it. Mm. Yeah. But pertaining to the sugar part of this, sugar and cocaine, here I go name dropping again, but I was doing Dr. Drew's show. I was saying, Drew, they've done studies now, and the brain lights up the same for sugar as it does for cocaine. And Dr. Drew is one of the foremost authorities on addiction medicine and addictions and all this kind of stuff. And he started waxing poetic. Well, it's not exactly the same. I mean, cocaine does this and that and the whole thing. And sugar does light the brain up, but it's different stuff that I was just glazing over. So I said, yeah, Drew, but here's the difference. we know that cocaine is bad, and we give sugar to kids at birthday parties, right? Both are addictive. Yes, I get it. There's a difference. That's where we are, right? We use food.
Right, for comfort.
For comfort in the wrong way. And we tell kids, this is okay and we need to celebrate. And I'm 60. I grew up in a world where there was cake on the weekend at my grandmother's house, right? That was a special thing, right? I remember churning the ice cream because it was cool to make your own ice cream.
Yeah.
And you had some of that ice cream. It wasn't every day.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't have 12 pints of Haagen-Dazs in the freezer, right? Now, people, every day, all day long, you know, the food is just, it's omnipresent. Right. It's on the table. It's everywhere.
Well, it's also very tempting. You know, one of the things I'm thinking about is when you talk about how dessert was a thing that you would consume on the weekend, I think many people are now conditioned to eat dessert after every single meal. And not only after every single meal, but many of the things that you equate with desserts are actually the full breakfast food. I'm thinking about cereals, right? These cereals, whether it's Cheerios or Lucky Charms or any of those things, are actually replacing the bacon and the eggs that you would feed your kids. And the first thing in the morning that a child will eat is a whole bowl of sugar, essentially. And then, you know, go run off and go to school and have to focus and work through the sugar crush, right? So how do you explain that all of us have been duped by this industry? That all of us think that these cereals are great for breakfast, that, I mean, oatmeal. It's still hard for me to get it out of my brain that oatmeal is not something good to lower your cholesterol. I mean, I've just been so conditioned to believe that oatmeal is what's going to help me live a healthier life. How did all of this happen?
Well, the quick history in the mid 1920s or 30s, we started discovering vitamine, which became vitamins. And we discovered that there were 13 of them that we need. And we learned through scurvy and this and that, the different vitamins and all the B vitamins and everything else. B12 is one of the 13 essential vitamins. For people that don't know what that means, your body does not make B12. You have to take B12. So we started to learn that you need all of these vitamins. Well, then the late 1950s come, and Dwight D. Eisenhower has a heart attack. And somehow he lives through it. It was a massive coronary. And a guy named Ancel Keys, who was very instrumental, he came up with the K ration that we use in military, the Keys ration, the K ration. He was on this whole movement of meat is bad. We don't know how he came to that, but somehow, you know, he was from Minnesota University. Someone had gotten to him. He was pushing this whole agenda that meat was bad. And when the president had a heart attack, he went, you see, the president ate meat. Here's the bigger part of Ancel Keys. He was talking about meat almost killing the president. Dwight D. Eisenhower smoked upwards of 3 packs of unfiltered cigarettes per day. Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't want to upset the cigarette industry. So.
Well, and look, you know, tobacco is a vegetable. I guess it's vegan.
Yeah, right.
You know, whether you're consuming it or smoking it, I don't know. So let's not look at the big elephant in the room. Let's look at something that has no relevance whatsoever. Yeah. Right? So later on in the 60s, he started down this road. And that's when he did his 7-country study. They only came up with 6 countries. And Ancel Keys realized he had a problem. Because if you're studying 21 or 25 countries, 6 is not enough. He wanted one more. So he says, let's go back to Crete. Let's go back to Greece. And they said, all right, Ancel, we're going. Ancel goes, not so fast. Lent is coming up. Let's go for the 40 days during Lent. So they went back to Crete. They looked around. They went, oh, look, they're not eating any meat. And look how healthy they are. These people ate meat like no other for the rest of the year. But hey, let's not let the truth get in the way of a good scientific study.
Never heard that. That explains a lot. When I would read that, when I read that information about what his studies in Greece. Wow. Wow.
Well, I got to push against this because what was his incentive to come up with a flawed study? Was he just so committed to his idea that he would do whatever he can to support it? Or, I mean, was he paid off by, I don't know, the sugar and grains industry? Like, why would...
Ultimately, I think the answer here is going to be a little of both if it's truthful. Because one, even if you got started on the wrong path, if you've built your career on being anti-meat and now it's starting to take traction, it's hard to get away from that. That's why a lot of people say that there's the people that do carnivore are lying because they have issues and they don't want to talk about them. That's why I've always tried to bring any issues that I'm having to the forefront whenever I've been talking to you, because life's not perfect. But when you're trying to make everything look like your plan is perfect, it's hard to back away from that, especially when you're rising to the top like somebody like Keys was and getting so much notoriety and attention. And then on top of that, the support was coming from the companies that make these vegetable oils and things. So of course, if they're going to finance your research, you got to keep them happy. So that was a little bit different for him too. I'd hate to find out that he was just another population reduction nut that wanted to help get rid of people, but that could wind up being the case too. Let's see what he says.
do that? Why would he bring a flawed study to the United States?
He was a bully, and bullies
I heard that.
like to bully people. And he was a dog with a bone. He had this theory. He was pushing it through no matter what.
Yeah.
And there was a scientist from England, John Yudkin, who said, "You're completely wrong. It's sugar." He got John Yudkin shut down. Oh, these Brits don't know what they're talking about. It can't be sugar. During Lincoln's administration, the average American ate less than 1 pound of sugar per person per year. Today, depending on which study you look at, the smallest study I've ever seen was 175 pounds per person per year. 175 pounds of sugar.
Wow.
Can you imagine how much sugar we would have to put in this room? That's what people eat per year. And I've seen some studies up to 300 pounds. So let's say it's between 150 and 300. That's a lot of sugar.
Right, because it's in everything. And also everything is processed. When I visit some of my friends' homes, like half of their pantry is stuff that lasts forever, which is great that it lasts forever, but like that stuff is so processed. And one thing that I've been thinking about recently is it possible that the reason we've been pushed to believe that so much of this processed food is good for us is because it's simply very profitable, you know, for America and I guess for anybody to sell processed food. It's a lot cheaper to make. The shelf life, you know, if you have a store, it just lasts for a long time. And much of the processed food seems to have come in at the same time where we had the food stamps. And so what a great way for the government to make food easily accessible if you can make it not that expensive. And so you can give the food stamps and just tell everybody, okay, well, you know, use these food stamps to buy processed food. Is there a link over there? I mean, this is just me.
There's a bit of a link.
Absolutely.
Two or three things happened. The food stamp thing was one of it. And I'll explain what that means. Back during the Great Depression, we had a crisis in this country, and farms, remember you heard this back in 2008 also, farms were too big to fail. We still worked on a farm system. The government started subsidizing farms, right? And when you do that, these people were able to grow crops and the whole thing. Now we have this overabundance of grains. And we start learning that we can start shipping these grains worldwide, right? We have a commodity that we can ship worldwide. So we've created that. Governments still subsidize farms. We know that. You can drive north of here, we're in California, and you'll go through a dust bowl where they pay these farmers not to grow crops, to create a market. So the government controls the economics on the grains. That's one side of it, okay? Now they're in bed with the farmers. You see what's going on there. Then you get to 1969, and the Democrats are running for office, and it's like, hey, if we give people something, they'll vote for us. You know, I don't talk about politics. This is not about politics. But one side's going, hey, we'll just keep giving people something. They'll keep voting for us. So they were trying to get, into office. And so they said, wouldn't it be great if we come up with this food stamp program?
This is a story as old as time when it comes to politicians offering to give you something for nothing. It ultimately cost you more than it would have if you'd have got it on your own. And this is great that he's pointing this out.
Poor people. I think it's a great idea. Let's help poor people by giving them food. Everyone loves that idea, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to take food out of an American's mouth? I'm not. Will you? I don't think so. So they put together something called the McGovern Committee. The McGovern Committee met for 10 years. Can you imagine? Think of all these committees that pop up nowadays. You want to impeach this guy, you want to get rid of that guy. We have committees every other week. The McGovern Committee met ongoing 10 years. Now, they figured out food stamps pretty quickly in there. But during that time, Ansel Keys, remember him from 1958, 57, whatever, he got himself in there and they kept the study going. They kept this committee going because they were trying to say, hey, we should come up with a standardized way for Americans to eat. And again, I show this in my first movie, Fat, a Documentary. At the end of it, I show the footage of the people on the committee literally throwing their hands up and going, we don't know. Let's just vote. You want to go with heart healthy grains and let's get rid of all the saturated fat. Let's go with that. And within a couple of years, we adopted something from Switzerland or Sweden or somewhere. They had somewhat of a pyramid. We kind of made their pyramid our pyramid. We put 11 servings of grains on the bottom. And if you look at it, on the first two levels, you end up with like 21 or 22, I can't remember anymore, servings of carbohydrates per day. And at the top, if you're not stuffed from all that, have a piece of meat, but a small piece.
So the purpose of this McGovern Committee was to essentially create this food pyramid, which now we know is upside down.
Yeah.
Is that basically
it wasn't what they were trying to do. That's what came out of it.
That's what came out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
They were
and
trying
then
to
it
give
all went
people
into
food.
marketing, right? I mean, it's just like on every commercial. And I mean, you were part of those commercials. You were, I guess you were a model for some of these workouts. And I don't know if you did Slim.
It's easy to sell something if you're addicted to it. I mean, if it's addictive, it's easy to market it. There's no doubt about that. And making sugar the big push has definitely been the key. I'm checking to see when we get to a break point here. We got about 2 more minutes in this video because I've got to get to work. But let's watch.
But I remember a big portion of my childhood was watching all these infomercials about how if you do this thing for 10 minutes, you can have abs like people like you.
Yep.
Yeah, my favorite thing when I was modeling was they would always call guys like me in to do beer ads.
Beer?
Yeah, beer, because apparently when you drink a lot of beer, you have a 12-pack on your gut. You are ripped, and you can dive and get a volleyball before it hits the sand. But it was that. It was infomercials. It was these lies. And I was part of that, right? Because when I first got to Hollywood, I had to earn a living. I had no other way. And an actress friend of mine saw me, and she goes, we were actually on the beach one day, and I was like, God, I don't have any way of making money. And she was like, with those abs, I had really good abs, you'll never stop working. So I went to an agent, and she had me working like the next week. I was ashamed to tell people what I did for a living. I was 30 years old. That sounded weird to me. I was 29. It just sounded weird to me.
Yeah. But I mean, you were part of the marketing machine of, really, it was misinformation about, food and exercise and that whole world, which people came to believe that they would look like you as long as they did those things in the infomercials.
That's one of the reasons why I'm so careful about who I choose to affiliate with on this program, because one of the keys to being able to do this full time is the marketing side of this business. And ultimately, it's the thing that sours me to doing this more than anything. But yet, I have worked with some great affiliates like Redmond and even Dreo recently, and they've been quite upright and honorable and doing good things, and I've liked the product myself. So I'm thankful that I can find things that I can get behind. But you guys have no idea how many deals I turn down for people wanting me to recommend this or recommend that, to everything from prebiotics and probiotics and supplements of all kinds that people want me to recommend, video games, things that I can't get behind because I think they're a waste of money or they're a waste of time and ultimately a waste of your life. So I'm not going to pick up companies that I don't think are going to actually give you something that's a tool in your actual toolbox to staying healthy. Some people will do whatever it takes. When it comes right down to it, I truly believe as long as I stick with the truth and being genuine and honest with the people that I deal with, and as long as I keep having the results that I've been having, which are fantastic, then everything's going to be all right. And I put my faith in God to take care of the money. Sometimes I get a little nervous and I get worried about what bills are coming due and things like that. But I just have to keep reminding myself, because we're just like those characters in the Bible who constantly get off track right after the Lord delivered them from something, right after they got through the Red Sea. Before long, they were already complaining and wanting to go back to Egypt. It's a lot like me too. I get those weird feelings and worries too, but I put my faith where it ultimately needs to be. And that's how I plan to continue to run this channel. And you know, I would love to say I can live on what the patrons on Patreon give me, but unfortunately I don't have that luxury. I don't want to really start talking about products because I don't care what product it is. It's going to go bad eventually. You know, it doesn't matter what air fryer or whatever. None of them are perfect. Anyway, I digress. You get the point I'm trying to make, is that we got to make a living, and I love being able to make a living doing something that actually helps people get healthy. So I'm thankful to be here and able to do that. I just don't always like the way it works. And I definitely understand the quandary he was in at age 30, you know, worried about how he's going to pay his bills, and then realizing that he just had to put his body on display and say, well, I drink this beer or I eat that food that he doesn't drink or he doesn't eat. And that's where you can't live that lie. It's hard to tell somebody who's starving that they can't do something they could easily do to make money, though. I understand. I'm just glad he's telling us the truth now, and that he's coming forward and letting us know the things that he's experienced, and that it has done him such a world of good.
And I tell people this all the time. Back when I was modeling, I did a few before and afters, you know, for products. I won't mention the products, but we would shoot the before picture and the after picture within 30 minutes of each other. So you guys know about camera work around here, right? You take a guy like me, take my shirt off, almost powder my stomach. You know, they would have you know, let's get some white on him. And they would put the bright lights on you, and they would tell you to distend your gut so that you had a gut sticking out. And they would shoot a bunch of pictures.
Oh my gosh.
And then you would go into makeup. They would wipe all that off. They would bronze you up a bit and say, all right, now go in and flex. And we're going before and after, taken within 20 minutes of each other. And I felt like such a fraud. I was like, I'm doing this for the betterment of something else. It's the wrong thing to do. And I was young then, and I was trying to make a living to stay out here. And I still have nightmares about that, that I knew I was lying to people like my mom and dad. I was not proud.
Okay. I got to stop there. We'll get back and redo that segment when I get back. I got to run to work, guys. But this is very interesting. Trainer Vinnie Tortorich. Well, I'll have part 2 out just as soon as I can. I appreciate you guys sitting with me for this first video. Hey, stick around real quick. I want to show you a quick little clip from my merch shop. I've got a lot of new t-shirts like the one I'm wearing today. I love vegetarians. They're delicious. But I've got a few other ones too that I've made recently that help you support the channel, as well as put your voice forward on the carnivore community and what it's done for you. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.